Going live. Good afternoon, everybody. Let's start with the panel discussion on PPM technology. I'd like to invite Mark Horn, who will moderate the discussion. Mark has more than 25 years of life sciences experience with a focus on project, portfolio, and resource management and PPM systems. He has chaired and presented at conferences in the US, Europe, and in Latin America. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Peter. PPM systems have evolved over the years from standalone to enterprise applications. This change has been great because they can bring us all what we covet, a single source of truth. Yet enterprise systems can have their own issues. One of which is that they're often designed to support the needs of one stakeholder group over others. That group commonly being finance for the executive team. Small companies have challenges too. When is the right time to invest in PPM technologies? And will the system fit both now and in the future? To help us gain insights, I'd like to introduce our panelists. In alphabetical order, Gabe Young is a member of the leadership team for the FlexPro group. He has over 25 years experience leading project and portfolio initiatives for the enterprise life science organizations and has trained thousands of project managers and presented at global conferences. Gabe offers 2 points of wisdom in relation to the theme of this panel, which are: help prevent wagging the dog by aligning on strategy first, and don't confuse good ideas with bandwidth. I hope he'll elaborate during the session. Peter Carter-Luke leads strategically critical investment projects for the product supply division of Novo Nordisk. With 25 years experience in project management, he brings extensive pharmaceutical project execution experience and understands the interfaces between strategy, tactics, and project execution. As an experienced project executive, he understands the need for building coalitions and ensuring alignment across broad stakeholder landscapes in order to effectively secure project results. Sebastian Kirbach is Global Program Manager for the Oncology franchise at Roche. He's passionate about and experienced in enabling business via program, project, process, and team management in the pharma and diagnostics industry. Peter advises attendees to first develop the process, then the tool, regularly check outcomes and look for ways to improve, and protect the tool that has been developed and implemented as described. We have just half an hour, and it's likely that we won't be able to answer all participant questions. I encourage attendees who don't get their questions answered to take advantage of the London PPM Summit's networking opportunities, including breakout rooms. Let's go to the questions. First question, panelists. What would you recommend to companies that don't have too many programs or portfolios? Can they benefit from using PPM tools? Who'd like to begin?
Well, I would say if your company really is in this situation and your company does well, congratulations and tell me your secret, actually, because I think we all may suffer from the opposite. We have too many programs and portfolios, and sometimes it's hard to focus on. In terms of tools, I would say, is there really a gap that you have, something that you can do better, something that doesn't really work well when you manage your programs and portfolios? And if that can maybe close by a software or another tool, I think then that's the opportunity to do it. But I would not just buy a tool for the sake of buying a tool.
I think if I can pick up on that line from Sebastian, I completely agree. And at a previous role, I worked for a large infrastructure public agency that had $2 billion of capital plan annually. And what worked there well was very ingrained processes that were then augmented in certain aspects with tools. And I think we ended up calling it the portfolio management platform more than system, because it really was a combination of systems that supported either the finance objectives, the capital planning objectives, or the more specific project management and project execution objectives. But it was more of a platform than it was, say, one system for everyone to just kind of do their thing in.
So I agree, and I think that the reality is PPM tools are still in its infancy. Even though portfolios, that term has been around for a number of years, these tools have not. So these, big companies, small companies, I think there's a lot of due diligence and awareness that still has to occur. We're figuring out how to find the right tool for the right price that will help us work on the right projects. And it's not a tool problem per se. I just think that there's a lot of folks who are at the very strategic level who still haven't figured out how to prioritize and find the right projects to work on.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Any tool can become a disadvantage if not supported sufficiently, or if allowed to become too complicated. What do you think companies should do in order to avoid this situation?
So Mark, I'll answer that first. I'll make an attempt. I think on this panel we have a number of tool experts, and I can't speak for Sebastian or Peter, but what I've seen, and a lot of other practitioners have seen, is that not understanding the capabilities of each tool has been a problem across the board, right? So a lot of folks, we need to make sure we're not using a sledgehammer to squash an ant. So let's figure out what the problem is, and then find the right features within each tool to right size the problem at hand, so that we can figure out which projects to work on.
Yeah, and maybe if I could support you there on that, Gabe. I've generally found that as project people, as I consider myself, in a production world, which a pharmaceutical firm is, for many of the people in the organization, I'm doomed to irrelevance. You have a lot of influence as a project person in a production organization, but you also eat by yourself in the cafeteria, because the whole organization is set for production. And so as a project person, I think our biggest challenge is bridging the information asymmetry gap between what it takes to do a project or a portfolio type decision to what it takes to do production. So in that, for me, is much more of a skills and knowledge and understanding of business processes than it's of tools. But if I should point to tools that above and beyond the obvious of Excel or whatever, tools for me should be something that does what I can't think or just extract from a regular thought process. And that's typically modeling. So once you're modeling something, you're looking at one project as a function of another project, as a function of a third project. So you have some sort of prioritization that you have to do. And that's a modeling scenario. Just like, what's the stock value of J&J going to be in 2 quarters? That's a modeling question. So you need a modeling tool. So I think the best tools I've seen that go beyond pretty reports or graphics would be something that can simulate scenarios. Whether that's a scheduling tool like a Primavera, or it's some sort of other stimulation tool, that's where the chasm is crossed in terms of where does a tool really make a difference. It's where it models some sort of scenarios. Putting something together in Excel or in whatever, that's just printing reports. So I think there's a distinguishing between what do I need to report to get all the execs happy, and what do I need to serve up options and scenarios, and that's modeling. So that would be maybe my long answer in terms of what type of tools do I think make sense from a portfolio selection process.
Okay, so for me, once you have chosen it to implement a tool, I mean, in order to maybe prevent this kind of putting and adding on. So what I observed twice is that a function basically gets they get assigned with implementing, let's say, a document management system, maybe quality. So then everybody in the company shouts, "Hooray, we support you." No, nobody does that. Usually then it's quality. They start, they try to get requirements from the organization. There's maybe a bunch of people that do it, but often it's just the function or the poor person that is tasked with that implementation. So then basically often just a limited number of requirements is actually then realized. Then the tool starts working. People say, oh, it's actually not that bad. Wouldn't it be nice if we did that as well? Or if we did that too? And then maybe quality started, then regulatory comes on board, then function X, Y, Z. And suddenly you have release after release after release. And basically at the end, it's not operational anymore. Yeah. So that happened also twice. So there were releases which were so complex that they could not be released anymore, right? So it was just not possible to roll them out. So I think that's why I also thank you for bringing this sentence. This is what I mean with protect the tool. If you have a tool and it works, please protect it. It's your baby, right? I mean, you don't want your own children, it's your child, right? So if you give it away, then please just in good hands. So if you then basically do another release or put on something, just do it very, very carefully that you don't compromise your whole functionality of the system.
Great point.
Yeah.
Next question. How do you get users to accept PPM systems, especially if they're not perceived as optimal?
Well, I think for my part, one of the things I enjoy about having been involved with systems is I learned about systems through doing projects and portfolios, not the other way around. So I've spent many meetings fending off eager SAP salesmen trying to convince us that SAP was the right tool for portfolio management. But once asked, show me a single person in the industry who's using it for that, got very quiet. So I think the thing I've used the best is, frankly, just boots on the ground experience. And then using that for tool talk, realizing the tool itself, that's really not the big issue I've seen. I think to Sebastian's point, I think the best implementations I've seen of PPM, yeah, there's a tool of some sort, but there's some really, really smart people that know what the reality is that drives the different decisions. So having experience at the specific execution helps tremendously.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yeah, I would say, I agree. And I think that what I've seen in the past is, regardless of how big or small a company is, it's more about whether or not you have good processes and systems and having the tool to map to those systems, not the other way around, right? What I've seen sometimes is a company really has a lack of what I've just mentioned, and they believe that buying a tool is a good substitute for those types of things, and it doesn't work. What they do is end up floundering and trying to fit this tool into something that's a black hole. And there's so now if it fails, now they blame the tool. The tool couldn't tell us, which things to work on, and it's like, no, hold on, the tool just accelerates or will give you additional information, but it's not a replacement for not having any system in place on strategic initiatives.
I think, Gabe, to your point, I think we all work in organizations that have finance departments that probably to a large degree feel that tools are the solution to much. And I think we'd be smart in reaching those folks, meeting them in eyesight, so to speak. So take the point of departure. Yeah, we got to have something. We can't just say we're so smart we don't need a tool. So we probably have to do something. So how could we maybe tier the decision making, say level 1, 2, and 3, and say, all right, well, at level 1, we kind of do this. Maybe that's a tool. Level 2, there might be some business process. At level 3, frankly, that's people doing their job. Mm-hmm. So we kind of accept that at different levels, there might be processes at a higher level, but once you get down, it's more just people working. But picking up on the point that you want to make sure that the finance or the other business critical partners, they get something, or you're just going to be perceived as, probably as hard to work with.
Yeah,
correct. And one of the things that I want to tie that back to one of the things that Mark mentioned earlier. I mean, that's what I've seen when it comes to when I mentioned, hey, there's opportunities for the tail to wag the dog, right? You have all these other types of biases and initiatives and ignorance when it comes to these types of tools, and you get poor inputs, and what happens is you're going to end up with outputs of these list of projects that you should be working on in an order that doesn't really even make sense because the garbage was in the beginning, getting into the tool.
But what about simple challenges of, it doesn't do what I want, it's hard to use? If you have project managers that are unhappy with the tool, how do you deal with that?
I mean, often, you always have people that will not be happy by any tool you give them, right? So, but I think we are not talking about those, right? We are talking about those that maybe have difficulties. So, but are actually willing, to try it out. So I think those people actually should be brought on board as early as possible. Actually, initially, ideally in the development and implementation process. Yeah. So you should really actually ask them, do you want to participate? Yeah. Do you want to pioneer? Do you want to, we really rely on your input? But once it's too late, well, probably then it's will be some release parties coming on. I would say, probably to get them on board, fix the largest bugs as early as possible, prioritize the biggest pains and gaps, and try to straighten it out.
Sebastian, that's a great point. And we've all heard the Pareto rule with 80-20 and all that, focus 20% of the, 80% of the issue, the point. But at one point, we worked with what we call the 20-60-20 rule, in particular when it got to implementing systems and new business processes. And what that meant was there's always going to be 20% that are eager, usually also right out of college. Nothing is impossible. Let's just go. Then you've got the 20% that no matter what you come with, they're not going to like it. But then you're going to have that 60% in the middle who are kind of like, we understand the processes, convince me. I could probably work with this. And those are the folks you focus on, because the 20 to the left, they're on board because they'll do it all. The 20 to the right, they're also politically smart. So once you've got 80% of the bus moving in one direction, funny enough, they find a place on the bus. But if you try to spend all your time pleasing the 80% and really don't want to make it happen, you're never going to get anywhere. And hanging out with the 20% who agree that all the other guys are dumb, you're not going to get anywhere either. So coming into that middle, you usually get the sides with and can move the process forward.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, and look, regardless of whether you're talking about portfolio management, project management, or any other sliver of business, a lot of this has to do with managing expectations, right? Letting people know what's coming down the pike, how it impacts them, what value is it to their lives or work lives. And, unfortunately, software, they don't have opinions or feelings and can't defend themselves. So oftentimes, if you don't do those types of things, the software can be the scapegoat, right? It's really easy to blame failure on an object as opposed to other humans. So, so a leader of any of these types of initiatives, it's super important to plant the seeds and water them and let folks know what's coming and how to onboard people to either being a user of the tool or the recipient of the results of these tools.
Okay, thank you. Looking to the future, how will PPM benefit from new technologies like AI, machine learning, and virtual reality?
I'll take a stab at that first. So I work with Mark.
Thank you.
And prior to so I'm currently back in the life sciences. I did have a 5-year break between my life science experiences where I had my own company. And my company there was, we produced massive events for STEM type of events, right? So I had a Minecraft license to produce events all over the world. I had a STEM event. And in that business, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of technology companies. My partners were Google, Microsoft, Intel, Acer. And they showed me things that I could not believe were out there, right? So even though I've been in life sciences for 20 years prior, it really opened my eyes to like, wow, right? We're showcasing things to our convention audience, and this is the latest and greatest. Like how far we've come in technology, emerging tech. I mean, really, it's exponential, right? So it's like every year we're doubling or tripling our capabilities, and it's basically untapped. When I see what's being done with video games and what kids are doing, we're not even doing it at these enterprise organizations because I guess maybe it's generational, maybe it's just ignorance in terms of what's out there, or maybe we haven't figured out how to tap into the really cool things that these tech companies are doing. But I haven't seen a lot of leveraging AR, VR, AI. And I can tell you that another slice of my life was, I worked closely with the AI students at Penn State University, and they're working on miraculous things that has to do with a lot with life sciences. And I don't think these big global companies even know that what these 20-year-olds are capable of. So I think there is a gap, and I think there is going to be a time over the next 5 to 10 years where that starts to close a little bit, where these kids are in the workforce, and we start to see the really smart companies leverage, some of the really smart data scientists and take advantage of them using PPM tools and other types of tools.
Well, let me try and tease you a little bit, Gabe. If we said this was 1995, that was the thesis I wrote. And I was that young kid, I'm going to change the world and all that. Here I am, I'm approaching middle age fast. And we're having the same conversation. So I think one of the reasons is, in the meantime, all kinds of other industries, we've got self-driving cars, we've got all kinds of good stuff. I struggle a little bit with the why. I've got lots of cool stuff. And I will say this, I'm doing a whole lot of AI myself and a whole lot of VR and all kinds of things. And there's one word that I've banned. 2 words, the Danish equivalent and the American equivalent of the word cool. I don't want to hear it. I want to hear value add and what does it do I couldn't do before. So first, here's the pencil I've had since college. And here's the fancy device I use for most of what I do in my life. But 90% of the things can probably be done with this. So we take a progressive, slow and easy move from the pencil to the computer, to the phone, to the iPad, and then maybe we'll go into some VR or AR. But it's the old adage, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And if we take that approach, I think, and I'm not trying to downplay technology, I'm actually forcing my own organization to reuse some of the technology that I'm using to build a facility, which I'm doing right now. And I've kind of provoked them to say, folks, I'm building $1 billion facility, and all the technology I'm using to do it with, I'm going to throw it on the garbage can January 2024 because no one wants to use it in ops. So let's figure out how we can do a simulator 2 years in advance of production start, because I have a simulator. If you take a pilot, he doesn't just step into the plane and start flying, just like we do when we start up facilities. He simulates. We can do it now, but how it ties back to portfolio, for me, is kind of a stretch. I'm not really sure where I see that linkage. I see plenty of linkage between project and production execution, but in terms of how can I make a cooler decision on a project through a HoloLens, I'm not so sure.
Yeah,
maybe I'm just getting old and crusty.
I know I would agree to that. Although I also approach middle age, so but the point is clearly. I mean, I think the pharmaceutical industry is rather conservative. And I think we are also in big tankers or battleships, right? So to convince organizations, the whole organization to adjust, to adopt something probably is very difficult. But you always have these islands of where maybe new technology maybe is absorbed faster. So for instance, I don't know, like data mining. I mean, the big buzzword now is real world data. We rely on that, right? We want to use it maybe to make phase 3s more efficient so that we can provide more value to the patient faster. So I think once this need is clearly identified, the companies will do what is required in order to do it. And I have seen that I mean, in the limited area that I am in at Roche, I can clearly see that we are going
Right.
and we get what we need.
Yeah. So Sebastian, I agree. There may be pockets like these islands that you're talking about where this is more possible. And Peter, I definitely hear your point. It is about value add. So 100% aligned with that. So from in my mind, AR, VR, some of these other types of things are probably doesn't apply to portfolio management tools. And maybe there's a creative mind out there who could figure this out, but I'm not there, right? But I do believe when it comes to machine learning, AI, there probably are opportunities there. But I think it requires someone at the strategic level to understand what those things are. And I don't know. I think if you ask many executives what AI means to them, I don't think that you'll get a very good answer. And I believe, unfortunately, and I think Peter, Sebastian, Mark, I believe you guys are sitting in enough boards and committees for you to recognize this as well. There are a lot of leaders out there who are running organizations who are amazing at what they do. One of the things that I've seen that they may not be good at is leveraging technology. They may have spent 40 years doing this one thing where change was very incremental and slow. And over the last 10 years, and I think you guys will agree with me here, again, I think it's exponential. And it's changing so fast in terms of the capabilities of what's out there using technology. I think some folks are just going to miss the boat on it.
Well, because sorry.
Hal, I suggest let's take a look at the questions that have come.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to read 2 questions to you. And the first is from Vinicius, who asks how to convince the old school management from a non-projectized company to implement new technologies for project management in the company. What would be the best approach? And I'm going to read a second question as well while you think about it. What about relation between effort for data input? This is from Stefan. Relation between effort for data input and maintenance compared to output, good and sound models. I think we won't have the time to go into too much detail, but we could start the discussion. Would you like me to read those again?
Can you read the first one again?
Maybe
Yes.
the first one.
Yes. How to convince the old school management from a non-projectized company to implement new technologies for project management in the company. What would be the best approach?
Well, okay. A quick stab on that is there's projects are typically capital expense, and companies go through sine curves of capital spend. If you're on the back side of that curve, you're not implementing any software. You're updating your resume. If you're on the front end of that curve, there's usually an understanding that we got to do something. And everyone that was around that did it before were let off on the last back end curve. So I've found that benchmarking against other pharmas is something that management really appreciates. If, say, J&J has a massive capital plan right now, and I needed to convince somebody we need to ramp up, I'd talk to the folks over at J&J and say, what do you guys got cooking? And then I'd go to my management and say, hey, by the way, J&J is increasing their CapEx spend, $1 billion a year over the next 5 years. Here's what they're doing. And they're actually being pretty successful at it, as opposed to convincing them the merits of Primavera or SAP or whatever. So I'd always benchmark against whoever else is in the industry that's kind of in the same boat as I am.
Another comment?
Yeah, I agree. I think there is a lot of that, right? Some of these massive software companies, like, how did you get into all these top 20 pharma? It's because they got into one or two, and then they all find out. It's very incestuous. Everyone knows everybody, and oh, so and so's using this one thing. We got to do it too. So there's a little bit of keeping up with the Joneses. Yeah, definitely some of that.
And so if I take that question literally, actually here you try to basically convince somebody to solve a problem that they don't know they have, because we are a non-projectized organization and you would like to implement a project management system. So basically that wouldn't match. So basically I think here probably you would have to first of all demonstrate that running projects will be better for the business, and then project management soft tools will come naturally.
Well said.
Okay, thank you, Sebastian. A great big thank you to our panelists, Sebastian Kirbach from Roche, Peter Carter-Luke from Novo Nordisk, Gabe Young from the FlexPro group. I encourage you to interact with them, our panelists, during the networking breaks. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you,
Mark. Thank you to the panelists, Gabe, Sebastian, Peter. It was great to have you here. We're going to the next panel, also moderated by Mark. And the topic is how to leverage the project management office to best enable project portfolio delivery. Please let us give us a minute just to switch to the backstage. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having us. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Bye-bye. Have a nice, gentlemen.
You too. Bye now.
Okay, be right back.